It's an open highway, restless nights, coffee houses, clubs and neon lights. I rock the people my way, working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, LA, I still see your face. Buses roll, the distance grows, but I remember you're just a dream away. Working my way, coming back to you. Working my way, coming back. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I'll see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between, I see you in the morning light. Take me home tonight, not wasting any time. Highway 95, engines on overdrive. From town to town, and in between,
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a safe and happy new year. Thanks for watching What Are the Odds with Barnes and Baris. Barnes will join us shortly. We'll talk about what happened to him yet. But I did speak to him this morning, and no response from Twitter. This is a pattern of behavior. This is what they did. This is what they did with Laura and I. This is what they're doing with Robert. So if you have an issue and you're someone they don't agree with, apparently they don't respond quickly. There's just still have not responded to PPD either, by the way. So I sent another one the other day, and it's been 6 days, and I still have not gotten a response. So they do what they want to do, and that's it. But we'll talk more about that when he gets on. Let me just say something right off the bat here, since I got such a lovely response. Yes, I meant that seriously on Twitter. There is no chance I am going to allow my children to take the coronavirus vaccine. Not because I'm, some conspiracy theorist, blah, blah. It is a novel vaccine for a novel virus for which we've had many and never had a vaccine for it. The children are at nil. The risk to these kids is nil. 3% of adults from the population we know that got this vaccine. By the way, it's never been tested with children yet, so I don't know what the hell anyone's talking about. All right. Pfizer is just now trying to move into trials with kids. So what the hell are you all talking about? The risk to children is nil. The burden estimates. Pneumonia is more deadly. About 80 times more deadly than kids my age. Kids my children's age. 3% of adults That means you're putting your kids at a greater risk. So unless they have some kind of ridiculous pre-existing condition with the some kind of respiratory condition, there is no way in hell I'm letting my children take that. And we will talk about Georgia. Yeah. So yeah, I'm freaking serious. Do you think I made it up? Think I tweet things I don't mean? All right. So yeah. Crappy Burger in Georgia taped a conversation with the president, which is, of course, a national security violation. It's a violation of state law, too, as I understand. I'm not a lawyer. We'll ask Robert that when he gets on. But as far as I know, it's a violation of most states where you need to have consent, two-party consent. You cannot tape a call with somebody without knowing. There are exceptions, and some states allow that. But the president, of course, is a very special case. All right. So if you read the transcript, it's a bit of fake news anyway. So the way they, of course, report it is not the way the transcript reads, which sounds like, but what the hell do you expect from these people? They edited 500 words out of the transcript with the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelensky, to make it look like Donald Trump did something impeachable. So what did you expect from them here? These guys think they're funny. They really think they're funny. Honestly, the president is a better person than me, I guess. I'll be honest. I would not go to Georgia and rally the troops for them. Not that I'm a person who would cut off my nose to spite my face, but personally, if I was him, I probably would not do it. Not without a solid backing from both of them to object to the Electoral College for allowing 2 U.S. senators did nothing while their state legislature was railroaded and elections were changed in a manner that is completely inconsistent with how we've conducted elections in the past. You cannot just wave your hand and make these changes, folks. You can't do that stuff. All right, let's bring on Robert to talk about his hack. All right, Robert, happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year.
Was it a safe and happy one for you?
Relatively, yeah. I mean, the other than the Twitter, whatever happened with Twitter.
Let's get into that. What is going on here? And then they don't respond to you either, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm thinking. I mean, what I got a DM that came from a blue check mark Twitter help account. And so that said that they were going to do a copyright strike or something of that nature. So to go to this place I would have to protest it. Went to protest it. And it asked that to fill in your password. And I was like, I'm not sure about this. So I went back and looked and saw there was Twitter help, was blue check mark, the whole 9 yards. I was like, okay. And maybe within 5 minutes or so, I was locked out of my account. So I went through the Twitter's protocols for any kind of hack and got back into my account, changed the password, etc. Then did a couple of interviews and came back, and my account was completely gone. And what apparently Twitter somehow allowed, even though they weren't supposed to, was they allowed them to add a different email, and that they didn't remove that email even when I changed the password. So they allowed them without the password to come in and change the password, then change get rid of my email address, get rid of my phone number attached to it, and change the Twitter handle. All things that Twitter has previously led me to believe they won't allow.
Right.
So that's where I wonder whether the degree someone at Twitter may have been complicit, or whether Twitter got hacked at some level. But so I reached out to Twitter, and Twitter's response was like something out of the movie Brazil. Basically, it was you don't exist. There is no Barnes Law account. What are you talking about? And it's like, no, they've changed the name of the account, so on and so forth, and have refused, despite you, Jack Posobiec, Cernovich, other people. Hitting up Jack, hitting up and Viva Fry, hitting up Twitter support. There's been no response at all by Twitter. They're pretending that this issue doesn't exist.
Well, got a pretty big audience right now. Got a pretty big audience right now, folks. At them. At the hell out of them. Because the only reason why I got back on was because of the blowback from all of you, and because Tucker had me on. So, and I may even email Tucker's producer, Robert. You want me to do that? I'll do it. I mean, this is another, they're always interested in stories like this. This is nonsense, man. Of course. And of course they can restore. This sounds like BS to me, honestly. And of course they can easily restore it, because an employee deleted Donald Trump's Twitter account. Do you remember that?
Yes. And they have all of it. I've been through litigation. Twitter keeps all these files. They
do. So you know that from your legal work.
Yes.
They absolutely,
they have them all backed up. They don't delete or destroy any of them. Sometimes after 6 months they do certain things, but they still have the data. They mislead people about what data they have and don't have. They keep everyone's data. People forget Twitter considers the terms of service that everything you give them is their data, not yours.
Yeah.
And for algorithmic purposes, for advertising purposes, for data research purposes, they keep all of it. I wasn't too worried about it from the sense of I figured Twitter was going to come after people like us at sooner or later.
Yeah.
And part one and part two is I want to start supporting independent platforms because Twitter really lives off of us at some level, fundamentally. Without all of us giving the Twitter content, Twitter would vanish or would become meaningless to a large extent. And so I think if they are really thinking about deleting the president's account like they've been talking about, then we got to have backups. And so I'm on Parler, of course, and it's set up a locals board for this purpose, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. And we're going to require me to accelerate my timetable for divorcing myself from Twitter, assuming they don't ever remedy this. They may come around and remedy it, but we'll see.
Yeah, and you guys got to hit them up to do that. And I'm telling you, an appearance on a primetime show wouldn't hurt either. I mean, because that's with me, and they just totally ignored me, Robert. I mean, they would not respond at all. I, again, 6 days ago, sent something about PPD, and I'm like, look, you ever going to put this account back? Because we all know it's in violation of nothing. Are you ever going to put this back? And they still have they just refuse to they flatly refuse to respond. You'll get an auto message with Laura. They just append it. They said, we're appending this to your prior appeal. That's it.
That's insane. So how's it? It was been 2 weeks now that she's been off.
She's been off for a month.
That is ridiculous.
It's and nobody will, and she will not answer. I mean, they will not answer her.
I had sort of delayed because of the audience, particularly who followed me on Twitter, was why I stayed engaged on Twitter in particular. But was going to transition to more use of Parler, more use of the locals board. For people who don't know, Locals was created by Dave Rubin, so it's a true free speech board. Parler has been pretty good at protecting free speech, and so far, I mean, if my test is is Alex Jones on your platform? If he is, then you believe in free speech. If not, then you don't believe in free speech.
And you guys should sign up for the Viva Fry what is it again? I signed up.
Yeah, Viva Fry Viva Barnes Law. .locals.com. People can join without paying anything, and then there's a subscriber VIP component if you want to join that for $5 a month. But the reason to do it is to kind of create and curate your own community, and so it's kind of like what People's Pundit Daily is. But it's its own thing. It's its own commentary. Provides some original and exclusive content there. But the idea is what Facebook and Twitter originally was meant to be, which was a community of like-minded people sharing ideas, sharing stories, commenting on it, sharing what they personally think about them, developing new ideas, strategic approaches. I think Locals is a potential technological means, along with Parler, along with Rumble, to help develop so that we can be independent of big tech control and be able to transition out of big tech control when and if necessary or if desirable. And I think it may be useful. I think, like, theoretically, Locals boards could even be used by candidates. Yeah. Because it'd be a place for your hardcore supporters to be, a place where they could sort of participate. It could be a method of campaign fundraising, but more importantly, a method of volunteer organizing, a method of distributing the message of the day. I mean, the kind of things that, frankly, Trump probably should have done, but never did.
Yeah, you stole that right out of my mouth. I was just about to say that.
And it's stuff we've got to come up with in the new sort of populist movement, to reform the Republican Party, or I think that's still more viable than a third party option. And enough senators are joining and House members are joining that show that the Republican Party, it does have an increasingly populist representative base within the power structure, not just within its voter base. And we're going to be working on a book on the populist majority to remind Republicans, some of them appear to forget now and then, what the actual belief structure is but also and to start to replace the political class in terms of professional consultants involved in campaigns, also create alternative technological means for campaigns to function. Like I've had a lot of people inquire that are interested now in running for office at some level, city council, county commission, election commission.
Very
They're starting to
encouraging.
realize the significance of your local election commission. If they just controlled one election commission in one county, they could have made a major difference in all these swing states. But because almost all establishment people everywhere, that nothing has happened. And so there's a lot of ways to influence the election, and especially away from what's happening, I think, in Q world and Linwood world, which we've been, warning people about, but they got to see the full display of it last week. The nuttiness, but they're trying to really push people towards to believe the system, it will never work, that elections will never come back, that democratic resolution can never happen. They're pushing people to almost create a militia-like movement from the early 1990s.
Is that what Robert, is that what's going on here? I mean, I think about it and looking at Georgia, I hate to say this, if you're a Republican or a conservative or you want Republicans to win tomorrow, you better just hope I'm off by a few points, because the bottom line is, Robert, and I'm reading Politico, and I was going to read the article, but they're blaming Trump for this. It's kind of crazy.
Which is, completely
Has
preposterous.
nothing to do with Donald Trump.
It is all their fault. I mean, what your polls showed a week or two ago, which was that the Democrats were ahead, all the other polls caught up to. That's right. Trafalgar and everybody else figured out, actually, the momentum has shifted. Yeah. And the two areas that you highlighted had below average early voting turnout for Republicans, Northwest Georgia and the coastal region. And so it's not a surprise that Republicans didn't, because that was heavy Trump base voters. And it's work. I mean, historically, the hardcore working class white independent voter that leans Republican has only voted for Trump. They didn't vote in 2018 either. And it was a big problem in all these key swing areas. So getting them out was always going to be tricky. And then they completely, I mean, from the moment, it will entirely be the Republican establishment's fault if they lose those 2 Senate seats. If they win, it will solely be because Trump dragged them across the finish line by rallies tonight. And Don Jr., who's been heavily down there. Yeah, you see, even Trafalgar has them up. Survey USA has them up, and on their latest polls. Everything since sort of after you polled in mid-December.
That's right.
Everybody except, Fox has it close basically, but they have it Warnock winning. They have at least one Democrat winning. Now, I do think you're right that there's a bias on Warnock. I really believe that. I do. Purdue is in better. I think Ossoff is in better shape to knock off Purdue than Warnock Loeffler. Now, the X factor there is Loeffler is far less well known than Purdue. Obviously Purdue comes from the Purdue family. He's cousins with the Secretary of Agriculture, former governor of Georgia, Sonny Perdue. And he's been a little bit better. But all of this goes, the day or two after the election, when I was down there, a bunch of other people were down there. They made it clear, Cleta Mitchell, who was on that Georgia call we could talk about, very good lawyer, very smart.
I wanted to talk about that.
Who was very aggressively defending Trump, made it clear to all of them that the only way, and Doug Collins was in that room, Sonny Perdue was in that room, the entire campaign structure for both Senate people, the lead people were going to be in that room, the Republican National Committee people for Georgia involved in running the runoff were going to be in that room. They used the existence of the contest to raise tons of money for both Perdue and Loeffler. I think over $60 million was raised in the name of going to election contest. Instead, went to the two of them, their treasuries.
Total scam. Yeah,
exactly. And then what the argument was simple: make the recount the runoff. That said, go out and make an official position that what happened in the Georgia election was wrong. That unless it's transparent in fixing it or remedying it, you will not vote to certify the electors from Georgia as the 2 senators from Georgia. That would have put massive pressure on the entire political establishment. But both of them are, frankly, corrupt insiders. It'll be hard to shed a tear for either one of them losing if they do. They both decided to trade in stocks while on the pandemic inside information they got. Right. And worse yet, they both refused to stop doing it in the future. I mean, it was like, come on, this is a no. Well, and all the people running the campaigns, all incompetent down there. Same political class have been running stuff for forever. They got their own incompetent insider pollster types who are telling them run away from Trump, and that's the way that they can get the suburbs and win the runoff.
Meanwhile, they're trailing Donald Trump in the Metro Atlanta area. It's incredible. They're running 6 points behind Donald Trump in Metro Atlanta. So what the hell are these people talking about, Robert?
They don't know what they're doing. I mean, their incompetence level is incredible. They all came up because of Sonny Perdue's machine. Yeah. Now there's some younger people there that are pretty sharp, but all the top brass, aside from being utter liars. I mean, they just lied to people left and right. Watch them lie. I was like, oh, how do you think you're going to get away with this? But the other was they're just incompetent. They didn't understand this. And so, I mean, that's why fraud was a great issue to run on. Not only that, it was perfectly timed because they could have said, Trump needs us to object to have a chance to win in Congress. You've got to come out to vote for us on the 5th, and that gives Trump a chance on the 6th. And instead, they were too scared to even talk about it.
It was a no-brainer, Robert. It was a no-brainer. Here's vote by mail increases fraud. I put that up as you were saying that before because these are not issues. If they would have made the recount and fraud the runoff, this is overwhelming that people in Georgia believe that vote by mail was tainted. It's overwhelming that they believe that you need to follow the same procedures, the verification procedures, as you do anybody else who walks in to vote, whatever it may be. I mean, to them, and I'm not just talking about it was a giant share of Republicans, and then independents went with Republicans, which was what made it a majority, a bare majority. No, these are big majorities, and it's because even large percentages of Democrats are like, yeah, that's how it went. I mean, they didn't even, and that was actually shocking to me. Right after a presidential election, we get a consensus like that. Normally, you have everybody run to their partisan corners. This side's bitter. This side's gloating, right? And so you never get that kind of agreement or consensus. And it was overwhelming. And this was a no-brainer. And then you had, by the way, the stimulus checks. I think Robert at Trafalgar, that was smart to ask about that. We loaded that in this last one, and it was a shrewd legislative move by McConnell to attach that $2,000 to those 2 poison pills. But those poison pills are popular with the Republican voter, Robert. They want an election commission, and they want Section 230 to be dealt with. So he thinks like he's like gloating over this win. You took a short-term victory.
I mean, McConnell did more damage to their chances in Georgia than anybody by celebrating Biden, by trying to completely cut off any contest, and then by squirreling around with the money. Yeah, I mean like a lot of the Republicans' defenses was, well, the Trump budget people proposed a lot of these crazy items. I have no doubt that they did. That doesn't mean Trump had a clue that they were in there until the backside of it, because that's how that works. The 2 core problems that Trump had too few allies and institutional sources of power. Now we go back and look and compare W2000 to what happened this time. In 2000, he had the Republican governor, his brother, fighting for him in Florida. In fact, his brother famously purged about 90,000 votes on the eve of the election on the grounds that they were ex-felons from other states. And it turned out some of them should not have been purged. But old Jeb went to bat for W, while now he's celebrating screwing Trump and thinks somehow it's unprecedented, the idea of contesting an election, which I find it's a degree of gaslighting irony that's just insurmountable. Then his Secretary of State, Florida Secretary of State, quite controversially, refused to go along with anything that Gore wanted and certified W as the winner without allowing a recount to occur. Because they were still counting, and she's like, screw it, my deadline's done. I'm going
killed
forward.
Her career for him, Robert.
She completely
killed her career. This is the difference. What people are really should understand. Fox News went to bat for the Bushes, his own brother. I mean, the stench was horrendous, even though in the end, it's probably, if you just take the pool of votes that we're all talking about, look at what the Washington Post, they lost an editor over this. I mean, guys, the difference is incredible. It's incredible. And they
Absolutely.
still
And
contested the
the
following
Florida State
election.
Legislature was ready to send their own to certify their own
Right.
electors for W after the
Marco
Florida Supreme
Rubio.
Court got involved. And then, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court got involved in all three cases.
Yep.
They didn't seem to have a problem with standing back then. And so it's the entire institutional process came to W's defense. Whereas all of those same people have been hurting Trump, the Secretary of State in Georgia and the governor in Georgia and Arizona, the legislatures in all of these states have only part of the legislatures have come to any aid. The Supreme Court, of course, is hiding under its desk, and not from Lynn Wood's latest craziness. They're hiding because they don't want to help Trump.
You know,
and they don't feel it's what we pointed out when Barrett was going through. Barrett was going to be more loyal to McConnell than to Trump, more loyal to the Federalist Society than to Trump. And that turned out to be absolutely true. But it's a problem that honestly ain't going to be fixed in a few weeks. So
no,
I hope that I'll be in DC for the electoral count. Cruz, I thought, came up with a fantastic idea, but it's a long shot, and it's a long shot because he has too few institutional allies. What we need to do is start building a political machinery to reform our elections, top to bottom, and start building a populist movement that has depth and breadth, that cannot be top heavy like it is currently, dependent on one man.
It's kind of backwards, Robert, that in the end, I said this after the 2016 election. I said, you know what, celebrate it if you want to celebrate it. But the election of one man, a revolution does not make. It's a little bit more than ironic to me that it was so top heavy. It's a populist movement, and yet it really was fueled by one person. It had no bottom up infrastructure, and it's a populist movement. Does anybody else not see the irony of what I'm talking about here? It relied solely upon one man and a few loyalists around him who occupied the most powerful office in the land, yet everything else beneath them was against him, and largely succeeded in handicapping changes that he wanted to make, right? So second Trump term would have been Trump unchained, and would have been allowed to do things. They would have also come after him a lot harder. Speaking of which, and while I ask you this, I'm going to read through some of this Lynn Wood stuff because I've about had it with this, Robert. I'm going to read from this complaint. I am. I've had it with this, and all these years, Lynn Wood comes out of nowhere to challenge the bona fides of people like Kurt Schlichter. And, right. And so good people are getting attacked because they're not buying on Lynn Wood's craziness. So we're just going to go ahead and read from some of this complaints. All right. I'm doing it. And we got a nice chunk of people watching right now. They can all hear me talk about Lynn Wood and what his partner said about him. All right. And they got the goods to back it up. It's not just hearsay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all these documents about Wood are that his former partners, all of his partners, not just one or two, all of his partners left. And then we're forced to sue him because he welched on what he owed him. And they explain the reason why they left is that he's crazy, that he's been crazy, and they have it on tape, and they have it in written documentary form. And so it's extraordinary. And that's one of the reasons I've been warning people about him. Plus, he was clearly swimming in Q world, and every crazy Q conspiracy that's out there, he believed in. And by now, people should start to figuring out that we're in the Q world, that they've been misled as part of a psyop. It was a good psyop, but it was still a psyop nonetheless.
It had all the hallmarks of a psyop, Robert. It had all the hallmarks of a psyop, and then people who were just duped kind of fueled it, It
was great. They took reality game, fantasy game, sort of like Dungeons and Dragons, made you an important, sort of techniques. You were suddenly part of the white hats fighting the black hats. And and you get to the point where you really think, if I just do this, the president's that gives him the authority to bring in the military and the CIA and Pompeo as anything but a deep state hack. Yeah. I mean, that was my favorite part. It was that's the worst guy in the entire cabinet is Pompeo. And
Michael Flynn sacrificed everything he worked with just in some elaborate, plan that he hatched with Mueller and Sessions behind Rosenstein's. But I don't even know anymore, But that is what pissed me off the most because I'm a former military guy, 3 decades of service down the drain, and then to mock that with some kind of crazy far out there conspiracy. they lost their family home. What the hell are you people talking about? You think he did that? And look, it's nuts. Let me read this though, and then I'm going to ask you about that phone call. But while I'm looking and you're answering about the phone call, I'm going to look through more of the Linwood stuff to grab some juiciness. But here's the beginning of the complaint, okay? In early 2020, due to the erratic, abusive, and unprofessional behavior of defendant Lynn Wood, herein Wood, as described herein, plaintiffs sought to leave defendant LLWPC and entered into a settlement agreement rather than litigate. And despite the issues described herein, and we're going to read some of those issues, plaintiffs Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson made significant financial concessions in the settlement agreement, despite having no legal obligation to do so, specifically to avoid filing this lawsuit in favor of protecting the privacy of defendant Wood and various third parties. Also, they were trying to spare him. They were trying to
completely
give up money that was owed to them to spare him, knowing he's a public figure and knowing his role as a defamation lawyer. All right, because of Richard Jewell, which I would dispute. By the way, he deserves that much credit. I think his first lawyer deserves a lot.
He lucked into that job.
Yes, yeah. But Robert, because this is the Georgia crowd, right? Getting into it, look at what Raffensperger did. I don't know Georgia state law, but in my state, you cannot do that, let alone to the president. You cannot do that without telling the other party that that they're being recorded. Is that the way it is in Georgia too, or not? Because now they want to refer it to Fulton County.
Georgia's a one-party consent state.
It is.
So as long as anybody on there knew that was party to the conversation, knew it was being recorded, they could record it. Now, under Georgia law and under interstate law, it's also one-party consent. The question becomes, when you talk to someone in a jurisdiction like D.C., where it's a two-party law, then the question is, does that apply for that person's protection or not? And that tends to be a legal controversial component. Now, because it's the president, there's other potential, at least protocols that should apply as a state official. Taping him illicitly is not encouraged, at least, and can become a national security issue in certain contexts, et cetera. So and now it doesn't surprise me that Ratburger did what he did. This is a guy that's been lying all the way through, still lying. I mean, here we are.
Unbelievable.
He still hasn't published the ballots.
Still
hasn't published them. I mean, when he wrote his $106 million check to Dominion in 2018, he said, one of the great things about this is now all the ballots are scanned and digitized, and I can publish them to the world with one keystroke whenever we ever have any kind of contested election at all. Well, he still refused to do so here. So what's in those ballots? I mean, what's on those ballots? People are saying that the ballots look like they were filled out by machines. There's other allegations that the ballots are out of sequence. They may have been ballots that should have been spoiled by Dominion workers that ended up counted because they were never destroyed when they were doing test runs on election day before the election office opened. Maybe there's something else in there, but there's clearly something wrong because he won't publish the ballots. And the second thing is he said he would do a party-monitored signature match check, and he continues to refuse to.
I was just going to say, but the audit, Robert, the audit. People say, would care to comment on the audit, the findings of the audit?
Sure, yeah. They asked Bernie Madoff to go back and double-check his books.
Thank you.
And Bernie said, hey, no problem. They look good.
Who lets the criminals investigate themselves? I've never heard of such nonsense. And then for those of you who believe this crap, shame on you, man. Your deference to authority actually makes my stomach sick. You just believe everything you're told. It's ridiculous.
Violates all election standards. The United States Election Assistance Commission says when you do a canvass and a recanvass, you need to have party observers there because they have the motivation to check.
Oh, that's right.
Same with the Citizen Integrity, Citizen Election Project. Same with the international standards for the OECD. Yep. They all require. That's why they admitted. People were asking why when we talked about that report, and they're like, well, I couldn't see it. You have to get into the report because the politicians wrote the report. So you have to dig into like page 65 before you find what the actual observers reported. But what the observers reported is that they were locked out of being able to observe the United States election in violation of international standards. So the everybody knows you're supposed to have a party observer there. And again, like he does this, a cross check of random sample of Cobb County signatures, and they come back and they say they have the highest signature match in human history.
It doesn't.
Does anyone believe that?
It's unbelievable, even with human error, Robert. It couldn't possibly be that low, Robert.
And
Come on.
again, the proof is they won't let anyone look at it that's independent. That's a party observer.
Yeah,
And
let me
when
look at it.
when
Let
they
me
did
see.
it in Arizona, 11% of the signatures, according to the Democrats' own experts, did not match. And those signatures were signatures that all the election officials said matched. Turned
Yeah.
out they were completely wrong. According to the Democrats' own expert, 11% didn't match. So we still haven't had a signature match from anywhere else. Isn't that incredible? In this kind of election, no one else will allow an independently observed signature match in any of these states with record-setting mail-in ballots.
It really is an insult to thinking people. It really is, because again, if you're going to expand this method of voting, and it presumably is tens and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in some states, millions, right? In others, it's their first time doing this, and we're to expect that there were less errors than in times past when a small select group of people who like to vote by mail or needed to vote by mail, whatever it could be. I mean, mind you, in some of these states, they never even did this before. Pennsylvania, even Michigan to some extent, was really not an early voting state until this year. So we're supposed to believe for the first time, I have seen entire counties throw out 100% of mail-in ballots the first time they did it, because it was the first time, and they really, everything was a crap show. Hidalgo County, Texas in 2016 threw out every single one of their mail-in ballots because it was in dispute. I mean, whether or not things were done correctly. So I mean, this is nuts. I mean, really, you have to be ignorant to elections past and how elections work to believe this crap, Robert. You have to be ignorant.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I mean, really.
The leading up to the phone call, that's what the phone call is about, is the president filed an election contest in Georgia. Only one he's personally filed. And apparently it's so successful, so effective, that they won't even assign a judge to the case. Secretary of State won't participate. Secretary of State won't support it. Secretary of State is not forthcoming with documents. It's not forthcoming with the signature match information or any of the rest. They have hundreds of pages of affidavits and documented information about dead people voting, about duplicate voting, about non-residents voting, about people voting twice outside of the state, people voting twice within the state, about people that are under the age of 18 voting, about felons voting, about the criminally insane voting, all people who are not qualified to vote. They have lots of information and evidence, inferentially and otherwise, that shows that the method by which people cast ballots here, particularly mail-in balloting by signature, was not done in a proper manner. No signature match was done. And they have that the count was done illegally, also unmonitored in key areas, famously in Fulton County, but in other places as well. There was no monitoring. There was no monitoring in most places of the recount like it's supposed to occur for the recount to be meaningful. No recanvass ever happened. The audit didn't meet audit procedures, either for the machines or the vote protocols. And the few people who blew the whistle and found additional votes for Trump in the recount were all fired. So by the Secretary of State. So they have at every level of voter irregularity that impacts an election, they have evidence and proof of it in terms of unqualified people voting, votes being cast in an unqualified manner, and votes being counted in an unqualified manner, all in contravention of the United States Constitution and the Electors Clause, all in violation of Georgia state law, all in violation of independent ethical standards, including the agreed ethical standards that the Georgia Secretary of State's office himself agreed he was bound by, which is the United States Election Assistance Commission's protocols and procedures for counts and recounts, canvasses and recanvasses, and audit proceedings. So because of that, the president says, okay, well, we got to do something. We can't get a judge to even schedule it. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, by law, they had to schedule it within 10 days, have a trial within 20 days, and they haven't even assigned a judge to the case. That's how insane it is. They're complete patent violation. Never seen any election contest like this in history where no court will hear it. And all the courts are pretending that that they don't know the case exists. Sort of like me and Twitter is how Trump is being treated in Georgia. They're like, who are you? We have no idea. And so that was on that background that he does the call with Ratberger. And now the president had made a few mistakes. He tweeted out some stuff that Lynn Wood had pushed out that were false about Ratberger's brother working for China. Lynn Wood didn't even have the name he gave isn't even the guy who is a brother of Ratberger. But putting all that aside, that ultimately Ratberger agrees to the call. Cleta Mitchell, other good people. The other thing, Mark Meadows is one of the few good populists fighting for Trump.
I mean, this is
criticizing him by Lynn Wood is insane. He's one of the when I was going through the election contest process, he was the best person around close to the president advocating for smart positions without fail. And he's fearless in defending the president, fearless in defending populist causes. Any illusion otherwise, people don't know the background of Mark Meadows and they don't know the background of Congress. He's the opposite of Mitch McConnell. If he had been picked to be Speaker of the House rather than Paul Ryan, we may not even be here. The election would have been outside of the margin of fraud.
Yeah, I actually doubt that very highly, and he had that plan, or I don't doubt that. I mean, he had that plan 4 years ago, and Trump made one of those classic Nixon-like decisions. There are ways that he reminds me of Nixon, where no, I'm just going to reach out to him. I think I can bring us all together. And Meadows and Jordan were like, and Meadows' wife, for those people who don't know, fought like hell to get Trump elected in North Carolina and elsewhere. When the entire establishment hated him, people like Mark Meadows and his wife were not abandoning him even when the Billy Bush tape came. And I mean, people really should understand. That's why it kind of pisses me off that people like Lynn Wood, that's another great example. Somebody like a Mark Meadows is having his bona fides attacked by somebody who just came out of nowhere.
Pompeo is supposed to be the hero. He's the guy who's more responsible for Julian Assange's arrest. Now, his extradition was denied today, but that could be a trap because the High Court could reinstate it, but might reinstate it after Trump is gone. I hope Trump still pardons Assange, but Pompeo was the number one guy behind all that. Pompeo wanted us to go to war in all these other places. Trump just kept him from doing it. So Pompeo is not a reliable source at all. Whereas Meadows is by far the best populist ally of Trump in the entire White House. I mean,
Robert, even when he was opposing Trump's and the Trump-Ryan skinny Obamacare repeal, or before the skinny, the one right before the skinny, he only did so because he knew that would not be sufficient, right? So he would piss the base off more by trying to give them something to placate them, where it was not what they had promised. And Jordan and Meadows are like, listen, the best way, because I remember this like it was yesterday, the best way to get reelected, the best way to keep our majority, the best way to serve the American people is to keep our damn promise. That's what and not to mention, it's they're a little, I don't want to say it's not ideologues. It's just that they understood Obamacare is more than just a healthcare plan. It's more than just healthcare coverage for people who can't afford it. It is the dramatic expansion of big government and a change in the role between the state and the individual. And they get that because I don't want to get into the weeds, but they are stepping in between and playing a role. They're stepping in between you and other members of your community, your doctor, right? Those are roles that have traditionally been left up to autonomous communities in this country. We don't have the federal government in the way, which is what kind of makes it sad to answer this question. Fuzzy creature it was. Jason's question first. Jason, that's because U.S. Marshals cannot go in there and do anything. That's because states run elections. So it is messed up. You don't want the federal government in these things, and it's messed up that you got to tell Jason they can't go and make sure an election, like U.S. Marshals can't make sure an election is done correctly. But Obamacare can still get in between your doctor. I know. I get it. I know. Right. I see how that doesn't make any sense, my friend.
Well,
but
and this was
the way it is.
The post-1876 compromise made it a crime for the military to get involved.
It's another thing.
And of course, the big thing with all this is that was never going to happen. These people don't support the president. The hierarchy of the military. Yeah. I mean, they've been lying to him for 4 years about Syria and how many troops are there. I mean, the idea that that's why it was always a trap. I was like, I don't agree with it as a matter of principle, but even if you agreed with it, thought it was okay as a matter of principle, pragmatically, this is where Q is so misleading. It was never going to go where you thought it was going to go. If Trump actually took the bait and announced it, he would be locked up the next day. The military's not, the hierarchy isn't on his side.
Yeah.
There aren't a bunch of white hats in the deep state. There's almost all black hats. That's the reality of it. So it was intended to make people believe, like Wood, if I say these crazy things, they'll actually become true, and now the revolution can occur. Not realizing that all they were doing was walking into a trap. And all the Q people walking into a trap. And it was, I think, independently designed to create a sense of futility to restart the militia movement in America. I mean, why was Q having people take an oath? An oath of a digital soldier to videotape and broadcast that oath. I mean, all these people have put a roadmap, so the intelligence agencies know exactly who could be a problem source in the future, thanks to Q. But the whole QAnon world, and a lot of this came from the QAnon world, not just from Q, of course, but that was the goal. That's how a reality game psyop works. They just really incorporated reality game technology exceptionally well, because the most common phenomenon in reality game situation where you have a fantasy game, but you incorporate some aspects of reality into it. Like, let's say you're going to find something, and so they do a component that's fantasy and a component that's reality, and the four of you go out like a scavenger hunt, if you will. What they found early on was people would see patterns that don't exist.
Yeah.
So like they would go into a basement, and they're supposed to go into the basement to find this key item. And then they would see 3 pieces of wood pointing toward the wall. And the person who designed the game just didn't notice that. It had nothing to do with the game. And they're supposed to go somewhere else. And instead they start thinking, oh, that can't be coincidence. That must mean that the key item is behind the wall. And they'll obsess over it for like 3 or 4 hours, not realizing it has nothing to do with the game. And they even have a word to describe this. And so the goal of a good psyop is to create a fantasy game where people think they're role-playing in such a real way that they often will create their own fake realities on top of that through their own misplaced imagination. And that was the beauty of the QAnon world, was its ability to distract people, detour their attention, get Lin Wood saying all this crazy stuff that makes the president look bad at a key juncture right when he's before the courts, and then right before when he's before the Senate. He sort of magically showed up in ways to horrify people away from Trump's position on the election. But and so you have that whole issue. We'll go into some of what was been in the suit. But as to the phone call, that's the whole backdrop of it. The president makes the call. He talks for the conversation's over an hour. And if you've ever been on the phone with the president, it will not surprise you that he talks more than other people on the phone. That's his nature. That's a conversation with the president. It tends to be one way.
You listen.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what is this? He's one of those people that he gathers his thoughts out loud. So he's finding his own thoughts by speaking them. But it was clear, like, also you notice his tone. His tone is always even on these phone calls. It's not like the dramatic side you see at the public presentations and speeches and whatnot. He has just this calm negotiation.
There really are 2 different Donald Trumps. There really are. That's
completely
very true.
People still don't. People undervalue that are his critics. But all he did was lay out, hey, here's all our problems, and he was like, look, I know what you did. You certified a fraudulent election, and and here's all the ways I know you did. And all we need is 11,880 votes. And we can get them from any of 5 ways that you committed this fraud. You got more than that number of votes.
That's exactly what it is. You just laid that out beautifully. If you read the transcript, and don't take our word for it, go read the transcript. That is exactly how Barnes just laid it out. That's how Trump delivered that. It is not at all the way that Politico and the rest of them
illicitly leak it. They illicitly tape it, illicitly leak it, and then completely deliberately misconstrue it. They knew he wasn't saying find false votes. That's absurd. There's nothing in there that was that way. In fact, his point at one point when Ratberger was
using signatures, there wouldn't be 11,000 and change. It was one of them. That was one.
At one point, basically suggests Brad and his pals have committed crimes. And what Trump is doing is clear. He's like, I know what happened. I'm letting you know I know what happened, and you can either fix this by documenting this and having an independent investigation of what took place. And I have no doubt if you do, there's 4 or 5 different categories where you'll find more illegal ballots than the margin of victory. And as long as that happens, then I don't care. But going forward. But if you're going to continue to railroad me and gaslight me after helping steal this election, you got another thing coming. And he was just laying that out in blunt language. It's the most blunt he's been. I mean, he clearly knew what Ratberger was up to. Ratberger's goal was clearly to take
Robert. They had been talking about stopping him in Georgia for months and years. I mean, years. This even dates back to when he was running the primary. They hate him. Just because he has an R after their last names does not mean they're allies of the president.
They're all never Trumpers. They're liars. I mean, that dimwit. Gabriel voting illegally from his house for years.
His own home.
I mean, what a crock. And Ratberger, is clearly, and what Ratberger was trying to do is early on, he was like, well, you agreed, don't you, Mr. President, that first he defended himself about how hard his job had been.
Yeah.
He had to appear in front of the Georgia House for 2 whole hours. Then he had to appear in front of the Georgia Senate for another 2 hours. I was like, oh my God, this guy's pitiful.
Yeah.
But then he goes into a routine of, at least, Mr. President, you'll agree that Dominion's not an issue here. And, they thought Trump would walk into that. He wasn't going to walk into that either way. He was like, I still have some problems with machines, but there's so much other fraud in your state. I don't need him. And so he made, and that I'm sure agitated Ratberger. But Ratberger planned on trying to entrap Trump to say something about the machines that he could leak as that part of it. Say, oh, see, even Trump admits all the machine evidence is bad. And a lot of the machine evidence is not his strong point, period, as we've been pointing out to people.
It's not necessary.
It's just the study that the Washington Post published, which we looked at right at the beginning, which was, were there unusual results from counties that had Dominion machines versus counties that didn't? And the answer is no. There's no big disparity between the two. The disparity is all over the place because it's wherever mail-in balloting happened to spike. And that can vary precinct to precinct in the same state, in the same county. I mean, in Tennessee, we have Upper East Tennessee trending towards Biden, and then just 2 counties south, it trends 6 points towards Trump, and Trump is where it should have trended given the constituency demographics in those areas. And it turns out all of those shrinking margin or Biden trending margin is a mail-in balloting spike that happened in that particular county and sometimes particular precinct. It's the way crooks. It's what you've been talking about for 6 months. That when you outsource the fraud, it's going to show up like this. Yeah, it's going to, because you don't know which county has somebody willing and able to commit the fraud. So in one county, you're going to have a criminal that's willing to do it, another county that's not, and that's where you'll see the disparity. And we see that disparity over the entire country. I mean, the difference between North Dakota and South Dakota, a lot of similar demographics there. And aside from Scandinavians screwing over Trump, that was the problem in Wisconsin. That was the problem in Minnesota. That was the problem in a little bit of the drop in certain other locations. Also, the Yankees. That was the problem in New Hampshire and Vermont and Maine. The people that remember showing up in your poll as English
wasps
are really Yankees. That only the Yankees still describe themselves as English. In Tennessee, you're American. That's it. They ask you what your ethnicity is, and you're like, I'm American. Well, that's my number one Trump trending group is a county that has the highest number of people who self-identify as their ancestral history as just American. Yeah, they don't know anything before that, and don't care if it was. But your polls were picking up on French, English, Swedish, some Danish being a problem area, and it turned out it was a problem area. It trended at like 5 to 10 points toward Biden in those places. So like I was breaking it down, and was because was weird was Minnesota, Norman County's the heavy Norwegian county. It trended toward Trump. He picked up more votes. He picked up not only more raw votes, like 20% more raw votes. His margin also improved.
Margin increased, yeah.
And that's the most classically Norwegian county in the state. And looking at other Norwegian areas, it looks the same. The problem is, in a lot of areas where you have a lot of Norwegians in Minnesota, you also have heavy Scandinavian presence. Particularly, it's what was actually really, I suspect, showing up when you're seeing weakness from Trump in the southern part of Minnesota. There's a lot that has a big Scandinavian presence there, Swedish, Danish, and historically they're an ancestrally anti-populist group, particularly in style. They don't. What's interesting is it didn't show up in 2016 as much as it showed up in 2020, but it's a constituency that just it's also because of where they came from. The Norwegians that settled America came from the populous parts of Norway. The Swedes and the Finns and Danes that settled here, not so much. And so they represent more. Your Swedish, Finnish, Danish American looks a lot more like the mindset and mentality of a modern day Swede, Finn, or Dane in those countries, which are all quasi-socialist. They're not really socialist, but quasi-socialist countries. And they're all, they believe in being nice and respectable, all that good stuff. Whereas the Norwegians here are totally the opposite of the Norwegians in Norway because they came from the working class, rural, traditional areas of the country. I mean, they got into fights about when people challenged their patriotism once they were Americans. I mean, that kind of mindset. So but they're just deeply anti-war. They're the leading group that's anti-war, and historically, a good bit of the Yankees have been in the Northeast. particularly the rural Northeast, Maine and New Hampshire.
In New Hampshire, yeah.
But they just also trended against Trump this cycle, which is a surprise, except for the fact that historically Yankees don't like populists, going all the way back to William Jennings Bryan. So like the parts of the rural parts of the country that did, because it was mostly a rural revolution that backed Bryan. Those very massive rural urban splits.
Yes, absolutely.
Where he didn't pick up rural votes was wherever you had strong Yankee populations. And that included parts of, like, I started figuring out this was a pattern when I realized like parts of Kansas trended toward Biden. Well, there's a big Yankee population in eastern Kansas. That goes all the way back.
And even in migration in Nebraska too, Robert.
Yes, same problem. It's the same
right.
problem at Eastern. I think it was a combination of the professional class and the Yankees that flipped that congressional district for Biden. That component, but otherwise, like North Dakota, there's 5% more votes. South Dakota, there's 15% more votes. Even though population-wise, there has not been a big shift between those two states.
Major problem with that.
Mail-in balloting. A lot more mail-in balloting happened in South Dakota. And you have to ask, how do demographically similar areas have completely different mail-in balloting turnouts?
That's right. And this is why it jumped out. I mean, forget the machines. Jumped out immediately, even on election night, and then it just kept getting confirmed in 24 to 72 hours after. It all really came down to this. The states where the mail-in ballots and you had integrity deadlines, and then you got a share of the mail-in ballot vote, and we knew what that share was. And it was basically put on the table, if not all first, some, and from a good majority of places. Ohio, Florida did it, and even North Carolina, by the way, because it is a little bit, and we've learned this over the last couple of weeks, it has been controlled more by more Trump-loyal Republicans. I'm talking about local elections. So they were all over. Don't think they didn't for a second try to drip and mail-in ballots in North Carolina. And the fact of the matter is Republicans stopped them. They had a Supreme Court election here that was like 500 votes away, and the Democrats were trying to drip more ballots in after the fact, because in North Carolina, you're allowed to count votes for 3 more days. This time they extended it to 9. But it didn't matter because they basically gave up on the effort, from what we're told, because there was just too many local offices that they couldn't do it in. And everywhere we got these numbers first, even if there was an increase, it just tightened the margin, but it was not enough to offset that election day margin. In the areas where those deadlines were gone, and we saw massive surges in the turnout levels, and it was only because of mail-in balloting, that is where the president's margin fell. And that is where he couldn't hold on in some states. And it really doesn't matter. Even in a demographically similar county that is across the border from another state, if they did it, then you can see those irregularities. If they didn't, and they followed the normal procedures and the normal guidelines, there wasn't these changes. And that's what jumped out at me immediately. I mean, it's very clear. I mean, it doesn't matter whether or not we're talking about Iowa, and it's a very white state. So is Wisconsin. So is Minnesota. It just does. So what? So is New Hampshire. Okay, very white. It doesn't matter. There were differences in what was fueling the increase in these voting. And there's a couple things you got to address, because I keep seeing liberals do this. They're scrambling because of all the first time irregularities. They're scrambling to come up with these like ridiculous explanations. And population growth is not one of them. Outside of Atlanta and Phoenix, you didn't really have much population growth in these areas. In fact, Philadelphia and other areas that are in question are depressed. They have had either no growth or declining growth. Texas had very strict guidelines. They have the 2 fastest growing metro areas in the country. And it didn't jump like this.
By the way, another place where the mail-in balloting, I think, showed up is suddenly resort towns, where people that have usually only vote in their home state, they don't vote in the resort town portion of their state. So like Chicagoans that have a second home up in Door County, up in Bay County, places like that. There was a surge of votes in tourist-oriented counties disproportionately for Biden. You're going to tell me that a bunch of Illinois people didn't pretend to actually live in Wisconsin and Michigan for this election?
No kidding.
That's my guess of what happened there. And who knows? In some cases, maybe they live in Grosse Pointe Blank and have a place up in Bay County, and they just voted both times. But whatever it was, there was an unusual surge in tourist areas How does that happen during a pandemic? The tourist
I
areas
was just going to say, during a pandemic.
voter surge. How did that happen during winter? So I mean, it's clearly the case that there's a big issue with signatures, and there's a big issue with however the ballots look, or no county and no swing state has allowed any independent monitoring of either the signature match or has published the ballots, even though in pretty much all these places the ballots are digitized, they're scanned. And so now again, the machines didn't make the difference, and population growth didn't make the difference, because I used Tennessee as a test case.
That's right.
And like I said, in Tennessee, you had rural counties. When I looked at the map, I was like, this map makes no sense. I've been looking at the Tennessee political map for almost 40 years since I was a kid. So I've been studying Tennessee politics. So I was like, how does this county, that's a coal mining county, that vote 10 points different than this coal mining county when they're ancestrally the same and they always trend together? Just like, how did all the bellwether counties magically no longer be a bellwether in the same election, which is what we have in this election? So all the anomalies are still pertinent and prevalent. And I'm glad at least Cruz came up with a great idea. There might have been some other people that had that idea, but Cruz gets the credit for it because he's the one that formalized it. Which is you form a commission. And what House member or senator can possibly vote against a 10-day election commission to investigate the allegations of fraud, to investigate the allegations of voting irregularity? Again, you don't have to prove fraud. You just have to prove that votes were cast by illegal voters, counted in an illegal manner, or the manner and method by which they were actually cast in terms of mail-in balloting did not conform to the law. You don't have to prove forgery or fraud. That's not the legal standard. If they just simply apply the same signature match standards they apply to nominating petitions, there'll be at least 10%, like the Democratic expert found, of signatures that don't match, and that's more than the margin of victory in every single one of these states.
Yeah, that's too much. And you know that, though, because a lot of these guys, Republican or not, Robert, their number one game here is to get rid of this guy. I mean, I have been listening to donors for years tell me about the Tim Scotts and the Lindsey Grahams who have been sitting in their living rooms. And yes, I am specifically referencing you people on purpose, because you know you did this. You went on Fox News and you sung his praise to the camera on Fox. And then you went and begged people for money who came back and told me all about your conversations. You want him gone. You couldn't stand him to begin with. You want business to go back to normal, business as usual. They want business. They want the rent seekers who pay their way to get their way again. It's that simple. It really is.
That's why Perdue and if they lose tomorrow, it's because Perdue and Loeffler got on a Zoom call talking about how excited they were to work with Biden.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago. I mean, nobody required these idiots to be more. And the other thing is, they still believe that, one, they run terrible advertising in general, but they still believe that old methods work.
Yeah.
Like when I was down there, I was shocked. I was like, okay, all we're going to do all tons of advertising everywhere, and we'll use the same generic ads. And they still think, running the ads that talk about socialism and, terms like that in Georgia. That's a Florida term to use in South Florida, where somebody knows what that means.
Right.
Atlanta, it means nothing. And that's how they're campaigning. I mean, it's a horribly run campaign by a couple of really terrible candidates that Mitch McConnell has helped sabotage at every stage. And to a certain degree, maybe he would rather be minority leader. I mean, who knows? I mean, they're just all thrilled to work with Biden. I mean, they think that that's a better environment. They can't wait to get rid of Trump. But now give credit. It shows the power of Trump and Trump's audience that he got a dozen senators to flip.
Yeah.
To say they're going to object. That's a record-setting numbers. And it was a brilliant idea to say, look, we're not saying to throw out any votes. We're saying let's just have a commission like we've had in the past to independently vet what happened and come back with a report in 10 days, because until Inauguration Day, we're in no hurry. And so if they vote that down, notice that every Republican who just won isn't worried about being primaried. It is happy to abandon Trump.
Yeah.
Lindsey Graham, he was thrilled. He didn't. I mean, it was a huge mistake not to primary these guys, but they got away with it by kissing up publicly to Trump. Lindsey Graham should have been primaried. Mitch McConnell should have been primaried. In the end, Steve Bannon was right a couple of years ago when he said the great problem for Trump is Mitch McConnell. It turns out he was dead right. Now, it led to Roy Moore and that whole debacle. but that was beyond his control, and that was immediate, and that was another stolen election.
He was right about Tom Cotton too. He called it 2 years. I just spoke to him, and I gave him credit for. I was like, "Look, you were right about Tom Cotton." He said, "No way, Cotton's gonna do this." He's a good guy, I'm sure. Great guy,
He's
but
an establishment hack, and he loves war.
he loves war.
It's about the number one grievance with Trump amongst both parties' establishment and the deep state is war. Yeah. They want more of it. He wants less of it. That's why the first major veto is to make sure he can't draw down troops in Afghanistan. And how is that constitutional? That's not a congressional job to mandate troops be in a certain place. You can require withdrawal. Since when can you force troops to be somewhere? It's mind-numbing. But so we'll see. I hope Trump still goes forward with pardoning Snowden and Assange.
Me too.
Because Assange is still at risk, and I hope he goes forward with removing as many troops as possible from as many of these dumb places as possible.
They're going to kill Assange.
Send it back.
He's in very bad shape, and I don't mean that like they're going to somehow like whisk off and take him away. I'm talking about Julian Assange he's deteriorating behind bars badly.
Oh, really? He's in one of the worst prisons in the Western world. And he's put under strict isolation. Yeah. With no computer access for a guy that's his life.
Yeah. They're killing him. That's it.
That's their goal. That's their objective. That's why, surprisingly, the judge denied extradition. She said if he gets sent to Supermax, he will probably commit suicide somewhere along the way because his mental state continues to deteriorate. But again, I wouldn't trust what's happening there because it goes up to the high court. They could reverse it, and it could be a trap for Trump not to pardon Assange, and then Assange ends up extradited anyway. We'll see what transpires. Assange is asking to be released pending the appeal. I don't think they're going to let that happen for reasons that belabor the obvious. Since last time he decided to
it's a flavor.
If I was him, that's what I'd be doing. I'd be finding the nearest boat and I'd be gone. But we'll see how it goes. But there was nothing illegal in the call. It's amazing how bad the media is about lying about Trump's call to rat burger. Shows you how bad rat burger is that he did this. But I think the next state, one is fighting as best as possible on January 6th. If they do form a commission, getting all of your information, Matt Brainerd's information, other good quality information before that commission over the following 10 days. But then either which way, whatever happens on January 20th, if it is Biden that's inaugurated, which at this point, that's the odds-on favorite to have happen.
Clearly.
Because, again, all the senators that are not running for re-election are already abandoning Trump. All the people who just got re-elected are abandoning Trump. So Lindsey Graham and McConnell are abandoning Trump. Tillis, can you imagine? This guy, both North Carolina senators, only one thanks to Trump. Both of them are going to vote to certify this election.
I told them, I've told people for a long time that Tom Tillis is a backstabbing, conniving, sneaky little turd, and he follows me on Twitter. I don't know why. It's like I don't know. You want to hear criticism? He's a slimy little man. That's really it. And listen, I care about Assange, and Robert cares about Assange, and you should care about Assange. Just to respond to somebody in the audience, because Assange, whether you like it or not, is a journalist. And if they don't like Joel,
he's the biggest publisher of whistleblowers and the biggest enemy of the deep state right. in its
in
history.
our lifetime, right? At least
by far, right. Nobody's achieved as one man what he has achieved. That's why they want to
do that to him. If
they want to crucify him to terrify everyone else out there from ever even thinking about sticking their head up.
Yeah. And if they can do this to him, Robert, then anybody.
And no one else will ever step forward in the role that he did.
Yeah, it's also a very chilling moment. So chilling meaning
absolutely
really
it's a huge win for the. It's sort of the taking off the head of Braveheart. That's right. What it's the equivalent of.
And what's his name went to go. This was before the 2018 midterm elections, and Assange was basically trying to get Trump to give him a deal. Like, listen, you got this Robert Mueller investigation hanging over your head. I can give you information right now that will show the American people this is completely partisan, and that this obviously was not some Russia collusion conspiracy. And what was his name? It was a client. I can't remember.
Rohrabacher.
Thank you, man. I knew it was an R, but I'm like trying to figure it out here. And Dana was like, look, I'm going to go meet him and I'll tell you if he's got anything worthwhile to hear. Well, he came back and told the president he did have information that was worthwhile and that you should make a deal with him. And the president didn't do it in an effort to placate some of these people. I mean,
him
look,
not
a lot
being
of this
around
stuff, guys.
clearly hurt Trump in this reelection campaign too.
Absolutely.
Not a coincidence they took him out before reelection time.
Yeah, it's information.
Yeah, I mean, he would have had the Hunter Biden story out months before and would have put it out much better than Rudy could. I mean, I like Rudy and everything, but you know,
when we were talking,
Rudy's past his prime as a lawyer. Number two, Rudy's reputation of, you know, cash and carry Rudy is pretty strong. You know, God bless him, but he hasn't been known as the conscientious advocate since his mayoral days. It's been, you know, who can write the biggest check. And so Rudy's not the guy, and Rudy's good with parts of the base, but he has very little persuasive appeal outside of that anymore.
It's just a change in generations, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. He was not the he could have played a PR role, but let other people take the role in court. I mean, he hadn't been in court for 25 years. That's how he did not do well in the federal court in Pennsylvania. Didn't know what strict scrutiny was. I mean, these are legal standards. There's a reason why Law Twitter was all excited because they were going to get to mock Rudy in advance, knowing he was way out of touch with how the system works. Also, you know how prosecutors work. They don't hardly do any work in their cases. The agents do all the work. And in Rudy's case, the lower level prosecutors did all the work. He just got to grandstand and read a script. And he's good at reading scripts and appearing on TV. That's what Rudy's always been good at. And again, I like Rudy. I'm just saying he was not the guy to take the complete lead on all these cases. And also because
Dresser was a nightmare, though. I'm talking about.
Yes. And he let Sidney Powell get involved when Sidney was off the res. Yeah. Let Lynn Wood touch the cases, which was bad. And then he brought in these people they were all QAnon source people.
Let me read
whatever it was, who said he was cyber warfare, and I couldn't find any evidence he was actually cyber warfare. And if he was cyber warfare, there's basic cyber stuff he got hooked on because they were saying stuff that we know is not true. There was no sending votes overseas. That isn't where they count the ballots. That's not how the system works.
And I told him that. I told them in an email right off the bat because they were asking me, hey, can you answer this? Can you answer that? And I'm like, look, right off the bat, because somebody hijacked one of the threads that we were on when I was emailing back and forth. And I really didn't even know the person. And I sent back something and I'm not familiar with who they are. And I'm like, listen, I don't know what the hell you're talking about because what you're explaining right now is not how any election in any locality in any state in this country is conducted. This is not how votes go. And then that was like 16 hours before Rudy went on TV and repeated it in that press conference. And I'm like, oh my God. Cause I'm like, really, I'm not sure, they understand. I mean, it was not that I'm not sure.
Well, Rudy knows nothing about election contests.
Yeah.
And frankly, he doesn't know how modern elections are run.
It was very clear. Many of them didn't.
Get-go. He thought machines did things that they didn't do. He thought they worked in ways they don't work. He thought, like a lot of people are making a big deal about digital adjudication. The problem is in like Georgia, I know how the adjudication process worked. There was no digital adjudication. If the machine couldn't read the ballot, it was spit out and taken to two-party observers to look at it. And they decided what the intent of the voter was. Yeah. So that's why that couldn't happen. And once they did the hand recount, it was clear that this isn't what happened. And again, the big thing was the work we had done at the very beginning, which was there was no big difference between counties with Dominion machines and ones without it. Yeah. That isn't where the disparity showed up. I mean, within Georgia, they all have Dominion machines, and there were weird disparities in Georgia between precincts and counties. The Justice Department guy that we had known behind the scenes that has now published his article about the disparities in precincts in northern Fulton County and in neighboring counties. And what he pointed out was something that we wanted done early on. He's a high-ranking Justice Department guy, but he's not doing this in the name of the Justice Department, but it shows what Barr could have done if he was serious.
It does. Yeah.
Because what he did is he looked, it was amazing hearing the media try to counteract this. So what he did is he documents, he goes, look, places that vote similarly, that are demographically comparable, that have not had demographic changes in northern Fulton County and in parts of Gwinnett that are neighboring to one another, voted in different ways. And there's a mail-in balloting surge in particular in parts of northern Fulton, and the neighborhood right down the street made up of the exact same people didn't have that surge. And that this happens repeatedly across places across Georgia. And he did that data research because of ideas we were talking about to the Georgia people from the get-go, that this is what you need. You need demographically comparable areas. I mean, we talked about this before the election. That how do you detect fraud? You find demographically comparable areas with unexplained changes in turnout or voting patterns. Like Roy Moore in 2017, where African-American precincts that are right next to each other, one has 95% turnout and one has 60% turnout. That's not normal when it happens all across Birmingham and then all across the state. Well, that's what he documented. And the reaction from some of the Democrats and the media people was, oh, well, he's just pointing something out that just because they're demographically similar doesn't mean anything.
And this is this is crap. This was the second part of what I was saying to you before, where they're scrambling to come up with these excuses. Another one now is yet another reversal of time-tested political conventional wisdom consensus stuff, which we all agreed on 6 months ago, but now has been completely reversed. Even Nate the Slimer used to write articles about how mail-in voting does not increase turnout, actually, and it doesn't benefit Democrats. There's no evidence that it does. Look at Florida, look at Arizona, right? And they would point to all of these big absentee ballot states, mail-by-vote states, and to make the argument that indeed there is no difference in the turnout rates in areas where they're mail-in balloting. Well, there was this time. So now I'm hearing, and just from in response to this, people are saying, well, they're demographically similar, but there was a larger pool of voters this time, and they're coming up with all this crap. Well, why? Why, if all of the literature and all of the empirical evidence shows that it does not increase turnout rates? No. The only thing that increases turnout rates is fraud. And I'm not talking about beyond normal participation level.
I mean, like, you could have some organized effort in some places
that get out the vote,
some difference, but it's never had this kind of impact. And not neighboring precincts. What, you organized the neighborhood 1, but not neighborhood adjacent 1A? That doesn't make any sense. So none of these things make sense. I have no doubt that sooner or later, when we use the Open Records Act, and we'll talk about building the election integrity project.
Do this because I know exactly where to go to these things, Robert. I'm not a lawyer though, so I will need your help on this. I know
what we got to do is coordinate and sort of. There's a data component, there's a law component. Use the Open Records Act request, build files, come up with template reform laws. Because some part of that is knowing how elections work in data, and some part of that is applying the law to it. But clearly we understand now a lot more than we did even going into the election about where the holes are. I mean, the election contest provisions are a problem. That either there should be a jury trial right, or the state legislatures have to get involved. Something like in Pennsylvania, every election contest except the presidency goes to the state legislature. And it's like, well, why shouldn't that should really be the case in the context of the presidency, since that's what the Constitution calls for.
Especially considering how the framers outline this. And this is not
a whole bunch of these protocols and procedures and changes. But for the people that are feeling futile and all the rest, and that's why I say I think the Q world was pitching to either Trump is still president or go join a militia. That was where the mindset was going. And that was another reason why it was dangerous. Is there's lots of ways elections happen at a local level. People can have an incredible influence if they start to become knowledgeable and active about participating in, running for election commissions, being involved in local, because it's a position where the professional class and the establishment dominates because no one else pays attention.
Nobody else does it.
The ordinary person doesn't realize I could have a lot of influence over my local precinct. And if you control your precinct, you control a lot. I mean, just for example, you could have, what you're documenting. In North Carolina, because they have proactive people, in part because they've been burned previously, at the local level, they didn't feel comfortable trying to do mass mail-in balloting at the scale they did in parts of Georgia Michigan or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or other states. Or Nevada for sure.
Not everywhere. In some areas of the sate they did, but in other areas.
Yeah, exactly. But they couldn't do it everywhere because they had enough local activists who were smart, who got jobs even at the local election commission. So, and when we were looking at it, what was fascinating was it didn't even depend whether Republicans or Democrats ran the county. All that mattered was you had some sort of election machinery in that county that encouraged, incentivized, or welcomed this flood of illicit votes. Or you had criminals. I mean, they definitely made it. They gave them the motive and the means, which we've been talking about for 6 months. Trump, orange man, bad, and that's why I don't think there'll be as much fraudulent voting in the Senate runoff as there was in the presidency, because there wasn't the desire to commit fraud was much stronger Yeah, there's the multiple ballots.
All
was
over
much stronger for the press. And Ratberger did go forward and start. Suddenly, he got around to getting rid of those votes that weren't supposed to be counted. Until you see that Stacey Abrams' sister said that just because there's a change of address flag, that doesn't mean they've actually moved.
Unbelievable. Did she reverse part of that ruling though? Didn't she?
Yeah, because that's the utility of public criticism. Those judges don't like that bullet being exposed as frauds. That's why there's still a lot of people who want to give up on the democratic machinery just because of the outcome of this election. That's not the remedy. That's not.
I was stunned. What she said, I was totally stunned. I'm like, do you understand how the flag is flagged? Do you understand what you have a formidable idiot?
I told the post office, please don't send my mail there because I don't live there.
Yeah, I mean, incredible, just absolutely incredible. But it also was a tell to me, Robert, that we were on the right track. It was a tell that, of course, she knew we were on the right track. So this is not the only ones who didn't understand how this is done were Republicans. I mean, really, like, I mean, seriously, like the Republican party, even the
I was sitting there listening to the people running the runoff campaign explain to me that no, there's a good number of people that even that have forwarding addresses that still consider themselves Georgia residents. Like a lot of us that work in DC, for example. This is their lived experience. Their lived experience is you live with mommy and then you go off to DC and get a job with Senator so and so. This is why our political class is incompetent rubes. But I was like, yeah, but in Georgia, you have to live at a physical place to vote, period. It doesn't matter whether you think you live in Georgia. You have to physically reside at a place in Georgia. That's the law for a reason, so that people don't just willy-nilly decide, I think I live in Georgia this year because it's going to be contested.
Right. And let me read this, too, before we forget here, because while you're responding, I'm going to look for more, because we are talking about pages and pages and pages, this document, okay? But I'm just before
you mean the Linwood lawsuit?
Yeah, here I'm going to read some of this. This is really page 28, but it's the beginning of what they lay out first. And just to give people some real quick background, what they lay out is that he was supposed to pay them. He had promised them certain roles and certain monies, and that in fact, going on with the evidence that they present, they suspect or are trying to argue that he he defrauded them, and that it was intentional. It was actually premeditated, and that when some of the things he went back on, there are press releases, and then he tries to claim that there were press releases announcing their employment, and then he tries to claim they were never real employees, I mean, it's just crazy stuff. But in the beginning, what they say is that his behavior really just began really deteriorate. So here,
the reason why they were trying to get out, and then they just wanted reasonable payment.
That's right.
Yeah. The case they're working on, of course, they did almost all the real work on the Sandman case.
And you guys know that case, right? This is right, exactly. Think about how much money he put in his pocket over the Sandman case, and these people were. What's the word I'm looking for? They
did all the work for him, and they were just going to get a small share of it, and they just wanted enough to get away from him. It was like you realize you're next to a crazy person. You just want the keys to the front door.
That's it. No, it's true. I mean, if you read Laura, you hear Laura Lamb beginning, because she's read it. It's bad. And beginning in the fall of 2019 and continuing through 2020, defendant Wood's behavior became increasingly erratic, hostile, abusive, and threatening towards plaintiffs Wade, Grimberg, and Wilson, as well as many other individuals. While in the years before the fall of 2019, he would at times be abusive, his bad behavior became far more serious and persistent than in the years past. So they're saying that it was always kind of a pain in the ass to deal with Linwood, but this became something else. And it was more severe. And they're talking about this year, guys. I mean, they're talking about
he's physically assaulting them in elevators, talking about sleeping with the wife of one of them, threatening the baby kid of another, while telling them to refer to him as Almighty Lynn, and telling them that he might be the second coming of Jesus.
Yeah, it says in this email right here that in late 2019 and January and February of 2020, abusive, incoherent phone calls, voicemails, text messages, and emails, right? And they got them all. They're sent. This is all documented.
They're just quoting him. They're just quoting him. They have text, emails, voicemails, recorded conversations to document. There's no dispute on these things, frankly.
And it says in the middle of the night, these things were normal. They became the normal. All of these erratic communications have a few things in common. Most of these emails profess, are you ready, guys? They profess that God or the Almighty was commanding his actions. Many were stating his refusal to pay the plaintiffs one thin dime, in quotes, and virtually all were abusive. So he also continued to deteriorate, which included an assault and battery on Wilson in Woods' home. He had traveled there to check on him.
He punched him in an elevator. What happened is he went out and had an easy case against Elon Musk. Totally screwed it up. Lost everything.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's who he punched. And that's who he also, I guess, he claimed that Grunberg is a Chilean Jewish person.
Right.
And kept saying, look in the mirror. You don't look like other people. You're a greedy Chilean Jew. I mean, come on. This guy's insane. He would call him at 3 o'clock in the morning. He would have 4-hour conversations with him where he would change his opinion and beat him in 1 minute he's attacking himself, the next minute he's attacking them, and 1 minute he's celebrating himself, the next minute. I mean, when you have to clarify, don't worry, I don't think I'm God. Maybe I do, but no, I guess I don't. You got a problem.
This is an email. You ready? So he says to them in the email, the boss, Pops, Lynn, asshole, whatever you wish to call me, knows that I have allowed a combination of pressures over the past many weeks, if not months, to become justifications for treatment of each of you to varying degrees and various times that can only be described as rude, overly demanding, and at times abusive. So that was him acknowledging in late 2019 on October 2nd that he had become abusive, and he tries to apologize because I don't know, Robert, it reads to me like he wants them to do the work. So
he needed them to do the work. Well, once he goes full on them is after the second settlement. And settlement that people on the outside believe was the substantial one. The first one, there was doubts about whether it was substantial. And then is when he's like, I'm not paying you a penny. Screw you. But what is he acts like an abusive parent or an abusive partner. Yeah. 1 minute, oh, I'm sorry. I realize I've acted bad. Oh, by the way, you're terrible and horrible and you deserve it. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he's saying they deserve it in that. Like, I have to just understand to you guys that I have reasons for treating each and every one of you the way I do. Something you did has led me to believe you must be treated like this. I mean, it's really crazy. And then
and remember, he had a weird, his father came home and shot his mother in front of him when he was like 15 or 16.
I didn't know this whole story. I don't know it, so I don't speak about it. If you know what happened, tell me.
Yes. So he grew up in a disturbed family background. So historically, when you see people that have some of these issues, they have that kind of traumatic past and saw behavior that they emulate later that is not good behavior to emulate. So he's often had a reputation as a difficult person to work with and a difficult personality. To my knowledge, he's never won a jury trial on defamation, but it seems like the breaking point was a combination of when he was going to get a check on Sandman cases and when he lost the case against Elon Musk. And apparently the judge criticized him throughout the whole trial, didn't like how he was handling it, thought he was making basic mistakes, etc. So that's why I think, because that's when he punches the one lawyer in the elevator, was after they lost. It was after a bad day at trial. So I dealt with him in person. I dealt with him, over the phone and by email and all the rest of the Sandman cases where he was acting nuts. So I always thought he was crazy, but when he got into Q world is when he took a whole different level of nuts. And Q is designed for people who have messianic complexes. If you have a desire to be really significant and special and unique, that's who Q targets. It targets he gets the Q movement, but particularly Q itself, targeted by their methodology and the techniques they utilize, people who want to be heroes of a particular kind and have a bit of a messianic complex in that process. And he got into Flynn world by helping raise money, I think in part, QAnon world. I got approached by several of these people several years ago that were referred through Flynn world, met them, and I was like, these people are clearly they're just bogus. This is a bogus operation. They're pretending to be spooks that they clearly were not. So the whole dynamic, and I think they got into Sidney Powell's world, and they derailed large aspects of Trump's early challenges, derailed it in the court of public opinion. So when you see these people saying, oh, the courts have looked at the evidence and rejected it, Only in some of the Kraken cases have they taken shots at the evidence. In all of the other cases, they haven't had no jury trials have been had anywhere. No full bench trials been had anywhere. A few mini trials of a few election contests were had, and there they changed the standards after the evidence was produced. So like in Nevada, they said, look, we got over 100,000 votes illegally cast. And they're like, well, why don't you go out and subpoena all of them and prove it? Well, you can't do that on a 4 days notice of an election contest. In Arizona, they actually prove a whole bunch of illegal votes in the signature matches not matching according to the Democrats' own expert. And all of a sudden the judge says, no, you actually have to prove forgery, knowing that
the margin itself right there, Robert.
100 signature matches.
That's the margin itself right there. I mean, you kidding?
Well, for these, it's 30 times more than the margin of victory.
It's not even right. I was just going to say if it's true that 10% of Biden's signatures don't match or even mail in because they favor Biden so dramatically, that's
the standards of nominating. Just apply the same standards that Obama had applied when people were trying to run against him for the state senate in Illinois, or that they just applied to Kanye in Illinois.
Yeah, right. They bumped him off the ballot in several states.
60% of signatures they said didn't match. 60%. And you're telling me it's less than 1/10% this year? I don't think so.
And then here, you were talking about the Messianic complex, and I'm only doing this because let me just preface this with this. I'm only doing this, and not because everyone doesn't have problems in their lives. And of course, you can run in and have a business relationship that goes sour with somebody. I'm telling you this because you really need to be careful with who you take the lead from. Okay.
He's not a reliable source.
He's not and then some of the wild allegations that came out, guys, he says, I would never make a wild allegation. He just tweeted without having a good source. In fact, here's a wild allegation.
That's his source.
All right.
That's what people don't understand. He believes these people really do have tapes. He believes that because he gets a QAnon message board tip, that's an actual, don't worry, I got the audio tapes, I got the videotapes, I got Roberts with the 6-year-old, no problem. I mean, come on, use your brain on these things.
You cannot make accusations like that, guys, without really, and I mean really, having it to the point where if you make an accusation and someone calls you on it, you better be ready to drop it. And here, Wilson is trying to leave him, and he wants what he wants. He wants just a small share of what he thinks was due to him that was really promised to him. And he tells him he's not going to pay him, and says that it's professional suicide to leave the firm. Later, he says, I'll tell you what's happening. And he rambles on in something that really doesn't even make any sense. Let me tell you what's going to happen. Watch what happens with the fee. I'll show you what I think of what you've done to me, right? Later, he calls Wade on the phone to tell him about this exchange. And he tells him that by the time I am through with Taylor Wilson, he's going to wish all I had done was his wife, right? This is, I mean, you really got to read it. And then on the 11th, he fires out an email, Taylor, John, and Nicole, effective immediately, the law firm of hereby withdrawals any and all law partnerships with your firms and you, including, but not limited to the partnership of Wood, Wilson, Grunberg, and Wade. And then he goes through this. I request that each of you provide me with your list of outstanding cases, blah, blah, blah. And then completely reverses itself in a voicemail in the middle of the night. I mean, guys, you don't do this in this world. You just don't act like this. It's crazy. Robert, you've been doing this a long time. Have you ever met? I mean, this is manic. This sounds like manic behavior to me. Like he's going. I just looked in the telescreen.
I mean, he's clearly off his meds, and he needs them, I mean, there's a reason why I said I was going to send him for a Christmas gift, a jacket where your arms don't move, because he needs it. He's been onto this, and the problem is, he's been rewarded for it. So because you look at it, back when we first, he was introduced to our world and my world, he had like 10,000 followers. He now has almost 1 million.
Yeah.
The more crazy things he says, the more notice. Unlike me, which Twitter is happy to see disappear, Twitter was letting him trend for day after day, promoting Linwood, which should give you a clue, by the way, that the Twitter and the rest want Linwood doing what they want. The people who don't like Trump love Linwood because he's the gift that keeps on giving, because he discredits election contests, damages Trump, and promotes QAnon craziness. And gets people thinking they need to form a militia and all this other nonsense. Getting them to think that they shouldn't vote anymore because it can't ever matter. They can't make any difference. the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing people he did not exist.
Yeah.
The greatest trick the system ever pulled is convincing people that they can't change it.
Yep.
Because reality, that's the only way it ever changes is people take action.
It's by people taking action, right? And that was in the middle of the night. By the afternoon, he completely reverses himself in an email. He blasts out a voicemail and Wade's inbox. It reads, and it's just transcribed. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm getting to this point because it shows you how patient they were with him and how they tried to get, because they had already done so much work. They wanted something out of this. Like you said, they just give me the key to the front door, right? But he reads a voicemail, completely reversing everything he says. This firm is going to go forward as Wood, Wilson, Grunberg, and Wade. Business as usual is back now being business as usual. He goes on an incoherent rant a little bit. They decided, or at least Wade, Grunberg, and Wilson decided to give it one more shot, it says, in the hopes of helping Wood and in the hopes that the work environment would return to the status quo. 2 days later, in their conference call with 5 people, he starts referring 3.5 hours, by the way, in a teleconference. 3.5 hour teleconference. He spoke almost nonstop for 3.5 hours and referred to himself as the Almighty.
Oh Lord!
I kid himself. The Lord.
They didn't even put in this complaint the fact that apparently in the same conference call, he says that he's the second coming of Jesus. He goes, "What if the second coming has already happened? What if Jesus came back as an imperfect man like you, like me?" Goes that gives you a little bit of a chill, doesn't it?
And
yeah, chill because you're crazy. Where's the window? Where's the exit door? Don't worry. Don't call me. I'll call you.
It matches with his behavioral
people
pattern.
Want me to have confidence in this guy? I mean, he got the president to tweet out stuff that was provably false that hurt the president. Yeah, so this guy's been hurting the president's cause, hurting the Trump cause, whether deliberately or just because. I think it's because he's on a messianic mission as part of the Q fantasy world. He was doing an interview with Epoch Times where he's like, I still don't understand why the president hasn't taken certain actions yet. And I think he really meant, why hasn't he locked up Roberts and sent him to Gitmo and made me Supreme Court justice? Because that's in that complaint too. He was telling them that he was going to replace Roberts, that Roberts was going to be sent off to military tribunal, and that Lin Wood, was going to be Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah, he's not lying, guys. It is. And I was just saying that the messianic personality, this is why I believe that, because the messianic comes through in the transcripts of stuff. He says in that teleconference that as evidence that he really does care for them, they should what is the evidence that they should work with him and believe that he cares from them, that he didn't hurt. I didn't hurt you. By not hurting you, that should show you and demonstrate enough. Why? Because by showing you who had the power to hurt you, to hurt your families, to hurt your law careers, and I didn't exercise it. Yes or no? That's what he says. Like, in other words, agree? Do you agree or not agree?
This is abusive partner, abusive parent. Hey, I could have beat you, but I didn't.
I could have beat you.
How much I love you.
Honey, come back home. I love you. I could have beat you, but I didn't. Just
I could have used the stick. I only used my fist. Come on now. I mean, this is insanity. And people want to promote. I mean, right now, if you put up anything about Lin Wood, it will trend on YouTube. You'll get it. They wanted Lin Wood to be front and center. They couldn't wait for Lin Wood to be front and center. They couldn't. I mean, to some degree, frankly, the same with Sidney Powell because of how off the res she went. But she at least never went full Lin sanity. She only went part of the way with the QAnon allegation. Yeah. But they both got set up. They submitted stuff like for people asking what should be the best challenge for January 6th and the rest. It's the proven irregularities that people who were not qualified to vote voted. They voted in a manner that was not legally cast, and the votes were counted in an unlawful manner. That's the focus, not the machine black hole and red herring. Because there they can come back. There they can say, hey, look, paper recounts were done, manual hand recounts were done, and they proved no problem with the machines in every single place where they were done. And some of that was, in fact, done in Republican jurisdictions, including counties in Georgia, including counties elsewhere. They can come back and show that all the allegations of Smartmatic and Dominion are just not true. Yeah. That a lot of the allegations that I don't know how they took the bait on the idea that one guy was on an Antifa call and they secretly recorded him and he said he was going to screw the election. It's like, okay, that isn't how – it's like Russiagate. And that was my point. Is like, if it sounds like Russiagate, run from it right away.
Yeah.
Any story that says, hey, these people are really super sophisticated and smart, and they're like spooks, high-end spooks, and they do things that only an incompetent rube criminal with an IQ less than 50 would do, you have a story that does not make sense on its own terms.
Yep.
So they can't be, hey, this guy that works for Dominion is a high-end spook-connected guy with China and Lebanon and Iran and everywhere else, and Venezuela and Cuba, and he's going to be on a Zoom call with Antifa telling them what he's going to do in the election on tape. Those two don't go together. They never went together. And the fact that Michelle Malkin took the bait on this, I mean, I don't know what One American News Network is thinking, because the problem is Dominion can show 100 million, 200 million plus, and same with Smartmatic. These contracts are so huge from these states. They can prove absurd amounts of damages, and all they've done is set themselves up to get hammered. And Sidney Powell, I mean, I hope Sidney starts to realize that Lynn is not probably the person to be allied with. When you think the vice president is going to be taken to the firing squad soon, maybe you've gone the wrong route.
That one was especially that was especially eye-popping. And I mean, really, I mean, I could keep going.
Well, I think Laura's a big Pence fan, but the
she is. You heard that one, huh? She loves him.
Yeah. So, but neither of us thought Pence was going to take dramatic action. I think he has the constitutional power to do so. I've explained why, but neither of us thought he was going to take constructive action anyway. But the reason why Wood went nuts on him is a Q conspiracy theory, or QAnon, because people get mad at me and say, well, Q didn't say that. Some QAnon did. Okay, fine. Q World was spreading a theory that he was going to reject the ballots on December 23rd, that he was going to send out notice that he was not going to accept fraudulent electors. He didn't. And that's why you saw for Wood, who's in this fantasy world where that's supposed to happen, it's so sort of disjointed that he goes off on a different tangent. All of a sudden, it has to be, oh, Pence must be one of the bad ones. So now we have to take him and he'll give it all up under the threat of the firing squad, which we don't even have firing squads anymore, people. But where he got that, and he thought the governor was hiding out. Military tribunals don't exist for anyone that's not in the military. I don't know what part of that people
I thought we were over this one. I thought we definitively answered 2 years ago when people went from saying Robert Mueller was on board and it was some kind of trick, to him being dragged in front of a military tribunal to be shot. I mean, guys,
that's what Q did a great job of, is introducing this idea that we should even have. Why should we have military tribunals for citizens? We're not Obama. We're not going to start drone bombing American citizens overseas.
Right. Exactly. And by the way, I flipped out when that happened. You think I'd even support something like that? Yeah. I flipped the hell out. That man, and by the way, vaporized his younger brother along with him. It was like 15-year-old kid who got it too. So I mean, that was outrageous. I'm not by any means some kind of terrorist apologist for radical Islam, but man, he was a U.S. citizen, Robert.
Once you start killing American citizens overseas, that's not a good habit for your government to get into. It's very simple. And so, even the idea, aside from the fact that no military tribunal was going to happen as a matter of reality, and the fact it can't legally, why is that a good idea for anyone to start thinking? We want military tribunals running around picking up dissidents?
You're going to be the dissident one day. And if you think that's a far-fetched notion, listen to how AOC has been talking, how all the likes of even Kamala Harris has made comments that are terrifying.
She would love military tribunals. No doubt about it. Her eyes are lit up already just thinking about it.
Yeah, she is one of the things that concerns me greatly about her is her role or how she behaved in her office in California. Look at even David Daleiden. That's scary enough. But it's just
what they did to the Planned Parenthood undercover journalist who exposed Planned Parenthood. She was a key participant in leading that effort. And I've always told people she's still the dumbest lawyer I've ever dealt with in court. But she was dumb and corrupt and mean. And it's kind of like the Animal House reference. That's not a good combination.
Carol says that Gabriel Sterling's on TV right now refuting all claims that any fraud took place. And Kemp said that the ship has sailed. So there you go, guys. I mean, there you
Well,
go.
what sailed is Kemp's career. That's the
It's
ship.
over. He's done. He's done.
And you see Trump, like people really thought he was going to go gently into the good night. I mean, he's not out there saying he's going to lead the effort to have South. I mean, he's already trying to recruit. It's not going to work, but he's trying to recruit Kristi Noem to run for the Senate in South Dakota. That gives you an idea how serious he is. So, and I think we need to. I think we need to organize every Republican House member and every Republican senator who does not vote for the commission and does not vote to object to the electors without the appointment of a commission, which is not even requiring throwing out votes. It's just doing an honest count, an honest process, an honest investigation, which neither the courts nor the executive branch is allowed to occur, which is on them. The state legislatures could have made sure it happened. They didn't. The executive branch in these states could have made it happen. They didn't. The courts in these states could have made it happen. It didn't. The U.S. Supreme Court could have made it happen. They didn't. So the only remedy left is Congress. But everyone that doesn't vote for that needs to be primaried as soon as they're up for re-election.
End of story. End of story. If you are a Trump supporter, that's it. Lindsey Graham wanted me to say this before. I cannot tell you how Lindsey Graham, and she was like, better tell him how he was begging. He was talking about on his hands and knees begging, I will be a different man. I will support the president, because he knows damn well that he had just been in the same living room talking about how much better the world would be without Donald Trump. He fully believed the Quinnipiac polls. He did. He believed them. And then he was begging for forgiveness and that he would right the ship. He is a liar. He
McConnell, Tillis, Sass, all these people that won. Now Sass a little bit less so, but almost all of them had pretended to be major Trump backers in the last 2 years, and they were lying in order to avoid a primary challenge. And that's why all of them need to get primaried. All of them, and then there needs to be a continuous revolution, like what the Tea Party briefly birthed. Needs to be a permanent movement of people at every level. I mean, imagine if we had more city council members that could participate in reviewing in a local election commission, members of county commissions, local state representatives. Now people see how important they can be. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we'd got a majority of the state legislatures in these states to take corrective action, Congress would be in a real bind right now. That would give 10 for a second to take action.
Do you think for a second that Democrats would not have done this if they had the state legislatures in 2016? If they had them in 2020, Biden would have lost the Electoral College.
The way I like to think of it is it's most analogous to 2012.
Yeah,
because you think of someone who has deep roots within there, has a strong base, and the Democrat with the strongest base elected since FDR is Obama. And so imagine 2012, and they thought this was going to happen. Remember that in 2012, the New York Times was talking about mail-in balloting is bad. They're going to go granny trolling, and they thought that was all by Obama's camp, thinking that Romney's camp was going to steal the election because they always project. Obama's people all come to Chicago. They figured the other side would do what they would do if they had the same opportunities. Now realize not Romney. That boy was born to lose. Nobody was born to lose more than Mitt Romney. They just like his daddy was born to lose, George Romney. Trying to do the same dumb stuff Mitzi
did. The tax release stuff. People should know that George Romney fabricated that. Releasing your taxes is a ploy. It won't tell you anything about whether somebody is doing the right or wrong thing. It's totally ridiculous.
If it's rightly organized in trusts or the rest.
Right.
I mean, Barry exposed all that when he married the Hines widow. And she put out that she somehow only made $1 million, even though everybody knew she was worth over $200 million. It was like, I mean, I've been using that for years in my criminal tax cases and arguing with the IRS. It's like, hey, you never would. If Teresa Hines could do it and she was a possible first lady, why couldn't my client just pay it?
Why is my client being persecuted? Right, exactly.
His tax rate is still higher than hers. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, all of that is bogus on that side of the aisle. But a lot of these people are only here because of Trump. And yet we're going to see how many that's the other thing I like about the vote. Expose how bad the traitors are and how many they are and who they are.
He saved the Senate, not twice. Donald Trump saved the Senate for the Republican Party, not once, actually not twice, but now three times. Three times. In 2016, they would have gotten flattened with Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush. They would have What's his name would have beat in the rematch against Ron Johnson. He would have beat him in
lost
Wisconsin.
North Carolina. They would have lost Florida. They would have lost several pieces.
He would have lost Pennsylvania. Absolutely. This would be
even Susan Collins, even though she ended up doing pretty well, really owes it to that Trump vote in Northern Maine.
8-point win
Republicans to make sure she helped.
That 8-point boost in the 2nd congressional district is a lot better than go back and look at how the other Republicans in the last 3 cycles before Trump.
She used to win by doing really well in Portland. She didn't do nearly as well as she did last time in Portland, but it was more than made up for by Northern Maine. And a lot of those voters only came out to vote in the first place because Trump was on the ballot.
That's right. Stephen King country. All right. Yep. They don't go out and participate.
Just think of a bunch of little Dolores Claibornes.
Nah. And Lemon Minty, yeah, I guess you saw that video where Kamala Harris came out and said that she was
listening, just like she was listening to Tupac in the 70s.
Right.
She was partying. She was doing Kwanzaa around the same time.
And busing.
Yeah, and busing. All 3. While her actual Jamaican ancestors were busy still profiting from the ownership of 300 years of slaves in their past. So, I mean, she is such a fake and such a phony, but she learned her politics from Willie Brown.
Yeah. So,
and Willie's good. That's why it's not like one, she manipulated who replaced her to be her allies rather than Newsom's allies. And that's what happened. The new the United States Senator from California is actually more of her ally than a Newsom ally. The other is, isn't it interesting how all the Biden story breaks after he gets elected? It's almost like people that are on the deep state side that prefer Harris to Biden are telling Biden, if you don't play ball, we'll just escalate we'll expose all of your crimes with you and your family.
I don't know if I told you this. I guess it's right to call him a buddy. He's early retirement from the FBI. He's tired of what it's turned into. And was talking and he said, there's just no power he said, this is why. I mean, I want to retire. I mean, this is what the FBI has become. You're looking at it as, well, they were doing this investigation. Didn't they have an obligation to say something and to, it's not Russian disinformation, but didn't they have an obligation? But from their point of view, that's actually not that's not how they think. There's no power in prosecuting people fairly. There's only power in holding that prosecution over the powerful's head. And then you have that power. He's like, that's just the way it's been like this for a while. It's just gotten much more political. Like there was, according to him anyway, there was a break between the Hoover days, Robert, and now. So there was a break between J. Edgar Hoover and how he conducted business at the FBI. And then, before the Comey era and actually the Mueller era. He said in between,
Mueller I mean, a little bit with Louis Freeh,
I believe that,
but it was more of a mixed dynamic with Louis Freeh.
Yeah.
I mean, Louis still didn't. Aldrich Ames was, there the whole time, right? How was he able to do something other like what he did outside of institutionalized corruption at the FBI? But it was worse under Hoover, and that's because Nixon canned Mark Felt or didn't give Mark Felt the top job, and of course Mark Felt became deep throat. The last time we've had a deep state coup overthrow a president, kind of like what's happening here, is what happened to Nixon. Yeah, I mean, Nixon made it easy, but by no means. But the reason wasn't Watergate. The reason was he tried to purge the FBI of its Hoover influence, and it was the guy who was the head of COINTELPRO was Mark Felt, and that's the real reason. Bob Woodward, I actually argued with this before it became public with Ben Bradley when he was still around and the publisher of the Washington Post. The editor-in-chief of the Washington Post. I said, maybe the real reason you and Woodward don't want to disclose who Deep Throat isn't to protect anonymous sources, but because if people knew who it was, it would raise serious questions about what you were actually doing.
Same thing. I mean, doesn't this all sound very familiar, Robert? They use the same playbook over and over. They just change the names. This happened because Mueller did not get – Robert Mueller is lying and he lied under oath. He's so full of crap. I know it for a certainty that he wanted the job from the president. He went there not to meet with him and say hello or to get his opinion. He wanted the job as the FBI director because Comey wanted him to succeed him so he could cover up some of the crap that they had done before. And
he even buttered up Steve Bannon. He had researched Bannon's background when he went up to talk to him right before he went in to talk to the president.
Yep.
And Bannon didn't quite if I'd been Steve Bannon and I'd understood how deep state really operated, that would have bothered me, not made me comfortable. Oh,
Yeah.
how's your daughter doing at the such and such a school? And oh, that's great. How's that working?
You're
I'd
like,
be like, why does this guy know that much about me as just an assistant? It's a sign that he was, angling for power. But his real job there was to clean up for the deep state. That's what he'd always been. I mean, how does the guy get promoted? First, he's look at his history. He's a Republican who somehow gets promoted to a prime gig by Bill Clinton.
Yeah,
Then gets promoted to an even bigger prime gig by W.
that's right.
Who then gets promoted by the same prime gig by Obama. I mean, so at some point you got to be like,
No alarm bells there at all, anybody?
Yeah.
No alarm. And to answer that, Vicky, because we're getting close to 4, and I'll ask Robert this too. Who is your favorite president, Robert? I'll give mine. I really have a few, but I have one that I'd like to acknowledge because he's never acknowledged, and he was fantastic. Who was your favorite president?
Well, as he told me on the phone a couple of weeks ago, Donald J. Trump.
Listen, I think no doubt that Donald Trump is going to be remembered for things that nobody's even thinking about right now for many and many years to come. If they don't dismantle what he's done with the space program, Donald Trump could, and this is not an understatement. I mean, I just can't understand how short-sighted people are. But Space Force and the telescope that he put beyond the atmospheric barrier so we could see better. Look, we're nothing if we don't figure out how to survive. I mean, it's really it. I mean, I'm thinking long-term here. And Obama pillaged the National Space Program. He reinvented it, put Pence at the helm. There are things as like not just Americans, but as like the human race that Donald Trump was much bigger thinker than anybody who came before him. It was supposed to be so smart, right? And they were so stupid and mired in the tiny and the small. And Donald Trump thought real big. We'll have a lunar landing pad because of Donald Trump. Think about that for a second. That's way beyond anything Barack Obama ever did. What's more important? Surviving as a species or giving people who don't want to work crappy healthcare coverage? Which one's more important? I mean, really, it's not even close. This is the thing about politics that bothers me these days. But a president that I never mention, that is never mentioned, that I want to mention, is Grover Cleveland. Mm-hmm. He was fantastic. He was one of the last Bourbon Democrats. He was removed very much. It reminds me very much of Donald J. Trump. They didn't appreciate him at the time. He was an anti-corruption, anti-status quo guy, and they couldn't stand it, so they got rid of him. This is a guy who was elected as governor of New York and went after Tammany Hall, okay? So that tells you everything you need to know about how much they couldn't stand him. He also said that if you don't keep me and reelect me, this thing is going to turn into a catastrophe. Free silver is a bad idea, and you're going to crash the economy. Well, he was defeated. They kicked him out. And 2 years later, free silver collapsed the economy, and they ran begging back to him. And he was older, and he was one of the first presidents to ever lose a re-election. And then, believe he is the only one to lose a re-election and then serve a term after that. And if you can't you can serve 2 terms after that if you lose. So it's like you can't have 3 terms back to back. But back then you could, and he really could have stayed for longer. He walked away because he was just like he was a public servant, and we never give him the credit anymore. He was one of the last Democrats, Bourbon Democrats they called him, who believed that really leave the individual alone, let the economy do its thing, and that was during an era where which led ultimately to like the 16th and 17th. They were constantly trying to get the power to regulate the economy and constantly trying to tax you directly, and it kept getting shot down. And he was like the last best hope for all that. And after a while they got their way, Robert, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I like aspects of Jefferson, Jackson, Lincoln, Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, FDR, Truman, John F. Kennedy, Eisenhower, even. Though he didn't do a lot, but he did restrain some of the excesses of the militarism that came up out of post World War II era. I like aspects of LBJ even. I mean, what he did on civil rights was important. I like aspects of what Nixon did. I like aspects of what Carter did, and like aspects of what Reagan did. It was after that we fell off a cliff until Trump. Not a Bobby Bush fan, not a Bill Clinton fan, not a W fan, not an Obama fan.
I see a lot of people mentioning Coolidge, and yeah, absolutely.
Coolidge did well. He was just slow on the uptick to what was happening economically.
And I think he gets mentioned by like the modern conservative economic people a lot. He gets his due credit. That's why I didn't mention him, but he gets that credit. Cleveland doesn't get. He's like this forgotten president who has this crappy interstate in New Jersey, and that's it. Or
he was really kind of the only decent president. Well, you could argue Grant wasn't really a good president, really, or Andrew Johnson. From the assassination of Abraham Lincoln until Teddy Roosevelt, Cleveland's the only guy you can really say anything that positive about.
Yep.
The rest are really not. You had his fraudulency, Rutherford B. Hayes, which is who he is. What Biden's title should be. His fraudulency, if in fact he's made the winner come January 21st. Though again, Trump still has a chance, but it's both upsides. Trump documents what happens, and on the worst case scenario is that Trump identifies for the world the problem with our elections and the problem with the Republican establishment party that need fixing. Best scenario is he's made the constitutional president. I think the best scenario is a long shot, but I think both Pence and the Congress have the constitutional power to take that action. That's what the Constitution is written and intended to do, particularly in a context like this where no one else has taken corrective election action. But it works for the backup strategy too, because Trump's initial plan, his backup plan, was to make sure his base understood this election was stolen. And that's usually hard to do. That the media usually beats back so heavy against that, it's very hard to get there. And despite all their attempts, they've not been able. The number of people that believe this election was not honest has only increased and deepened since the election day.
Robert, I tweeted it the other day, and I should have put it up here to show you, but it really spoke to two things. After your question, Daft, it was Teddy Roosevelt. He was shot, and he continued his speech and finished his speech. That's the answer to that. It was definitely good old Teddy, who would be rolling in his grave right now over these tech companies. I mean, could you imagine?
He had no sympathy for big trust and big monopolies, and came from that wing, and also was sort of an independent guy, personality-wise. He was not an establishment hack kind of guy. There are a lot of things I don't like that Teddy did, but there's a lot I do.
Yeah, right. And I'm right up there with you. There's some things that even the whole progressive era was a total fraud, scared the hell out of me, but it had a need.
Power. Well, look at right now. If we had election by senator by state legislature, these senators wouldn't be playing these games because they would get to be withdrawn and be pulled back from the Senate. The whole point of the state legislature was a more democratic mechanism, as you've written about,
absolutely,
of controlling the Senate than quote unquote direct elections were, because direct elections was really about 6-year terms with no strings.
It was, and what Robert's talking about is a book I wrote years ago. And in that chapter, I mean, I'm a numbers guy, right? And it's really clear. Average tenure in the U.S. Senate and then the House followed, exploded after the log rolling deal between the 16th and 17th Amendments. You have to understand how seniority works in Washington, D.C. For special interests, it's much more difficult and much more expensive to keep buying this one senator every term, because that pain in the butt state legislature keeps calling them back and replacing them with a new guy that you have to bribe and you have to convince to do your bidding, like we see them do now on K Street. The evidence really doesn't show that the direct election of senators made it any more representative. In fact, it's a total opposite. And to total opposite. And the money, Robert, was concentrated in the Midwest and around the Carnegies and the tycoons of business. And it was much more spreaded during the Gilded era, the age of the guilds, than it is now. It's more concentrated now. Wealth concentration is worse now. Oh, yeah. So the progressive era did nothing. Actually, it harmed.
It shifted. It created the modern administrative state.
That's it.
With civil service reform that made people immune from political pressures that run your life.
That's exactly right. And it took away your ability to rein them in. And now that when your local
postman depended on who won the election, your local postman would do really, really good work, because how good of work he did impacted the election in your local district.
Yeah.
When the local postman no longer cares, then they can manipulate it however they want. You can infer in this election, given who the postal union endorsed, as to who that likely was.
More projection, by the way. Remember?
Yeah,
more
absolutely. I mean, all of the civil service reforms, progressive movement reforms was all about shifting power from working class people to the professional class and from the ordinary individual to the administrative state. And it's worked extraordinarily. I mean, that's one area where Trump has not had much success, is pulling back the administrative state.
And now that polling's over, I can obviously admit it. Trump comes very, very high, especially when it comes to modern presidents. I don't even think it's close. Reagan gets all this credit. Are you kidding me? It's not. And Reagan was great, Robert, but he did not have the freedom that Donald J. Trump had. So whether you agree with Trump or not,
we've ever had. Andrew Jackson would be a close second, but Trump is by far the most populous.
But in the modern era, there was no one like him. The economic delivery was historic.
We didn't invade a single country.
Nope.
Which is the first time since Carter.
Yeah.
And you could argue about Carter because he did try.
He caved to them, Robert, at the end. He did cave to the industrial complex at the end, which cost him dearly anyway. But he tried and resisted, but he caved. Trump didn't cave. He fought all the way. And whether you liked or supported what he said he was going to do, he freaking did what he said he was going to do.
Trade, he did what everybody said you couldn't do for the last 30 years.
Yep.
Renegotiate NAFTA, get rid of TPP, and start to meaningfully contest China.
He was an ICANN president, Robert, after decades and decades and decades of
that's why
I can't.
Whether he's president January 21st or not, I don't think it's the last we've heard of Donald Trump.
Yeah, me either. That's a good place to I guess that's a good place to leave it off here. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing election coverage. I don't know what you're up to. I should have asked you before we even talking about this on air.
Going to DC.
I heard you say that before.
There, try to help coordinate things, try to help make sure the message stays on point in terms of the issues, and at least make everybody. There'll be no uninformed decision by any member of the House or the Senate. Put it that way. They'll know what the legal issues are. They'll know that there's clear evidentiary issues. And so if they don't vote for a commission and they vote to certify the electors instead, there are people that, and it's also to help relay the message. Anybody who doesn't vote for the commission or contest the electors will be getting primaried as soon as that. And it'll be a sophisticated primary opposition. And Trump will be as you know from polling and being involved in campaigns, if Trump gets involved in a primary, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
And Trump stayed out of almost all these primaries, except for establishment candidates at the request of McConnell or Ryan.
Yeah.
Now he's going to be stepping in the other way. And he's been making it clear. It's the last thing he told me on the phone when I talked to him several weeks ago was he said, this is very educational to figure out who your friends are. And if people know who Trump is, that means he's going to remember who were not his friends too.
Yeah.
So one way or the other, political change is coming over the next 4 years.
He could be such a force, Robert. He crushed us. He crushed us.
He could make any primary candidate the favorite or a close favorite overnight. Because
we were the better one for him too.
Fundraising, both of those things. And he's willing to leverage it. And he's more than willing to leverage it. And he has been increasingly, even he was shocked by the degree to which McConnell did what McConnell did. The Georgia governor did what he did. The South Dakota minority leader did what he did. I'm not minority leader, but second in command in the Senate. Yeah. All of those guys, Trump's coming for him.
Yeah.
So, good luck. You better be saddled up to ride with Trump, or it's the last ride you're going to take politically.
It was always, but whatever way you sliced it, it was always Trump today and you tomorrow, guys. It really was, because either you were going to stand up and do this now, have this fight now, have the courage, the backbone to do it, or one of two things was going to happen. One, you were going to be defeated by Democrats if you were in a competitive area, because they'll do what they did to him to you now, dummies. Really, they're so stupid. Or the option B, that you think you're safe, but you're not. And because you were a coward, people will remember you were a coward. And they're
so accustomed to not being meaningfully primaried and to being able to dodge a primary, despite what the Tea Party pulled off in some key House races. But that Tea Party is nothing compared to Trump.
No.
So when Trump puts his finger on the scale, it's going to be a change. And he remembers that. And I think he will be running 4 years from now. And he has the kind of energy. He's not going to look like a decrepit Biden. He's the only guy to be in the White House to not age.
He didn't age. The guy didn't age at all. He looks great still. He looks like the same.
He loves this stuff. Like, he doesn't get down about any of it. It's like, okay, you stole the election. I know you stole the election. Well, you can either give me remedy now, or I'm going to get remedy later. So it's up to you. But if you think you're going to screw me over and get away with it, good luck with that.
The workers in the new lots, they're not giving it up. They just dropped the dumpster off the yesterday, I think it was, the new dumpster, because all the scraps from building the construction, has to be replaced every couple of days. They are still doing it. They've been doing it, but they did it again yesterday when it came. Took black spray paint and spray painted Trump 2020 on the side of the new dumpster. And I tweeted, because these are not white people. It speaks really to two things. What you just said before, it's not just the number, but how deep it is that people are not accepting it and they know what happened here. And then also that these are not white people. These are Guatemalans. These are, that shows you how much of an impact he made on non-white voters, how loyal they are to him in some of these communities. And they're just never going to give it up. They're never going to, believe me, I talk to them all the time. They're never going to just accept Joe Biden. It's never going to happen. Never gonna happen.
There is history for this. This was the attitude. There were some people that were printing articles from Orange County out in 1974. And this was the attitude of a lot of Nixon supporters. They felt betrayed by the institutional Republican Party. Many of them came home in 74. And they never thought it was a legitimate effort what happened in Nixon. This is far worse than what happened in Nixon.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea, Andrew Jackson's people never forgot what happened in 1824, and it built a real movement through 1828. And I think that is one way, shape, or form. That's what's coming. And I think that and Trump's going to be a key leader in it. So January 6th is going to expose who are the heroes and who are the traitors. And the traitors will face consequence sooner or later politically.
The president's right. It will be most productive, at least, right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to make a nice little list. All right, Robert, pitch your community again one more time, because I love it.
So where you can now find me, since Twitter has forgotten I exist and has memory hold me in the Orwellian way, is vivabarneslaw.locals.com. vivabarneslaw.locals.com. That's where I'm at. I'm also going to be on Parler at just Barnes Law, one word.
And folks, they did this to him. I'm a cynic, a full-blown cynic now. They did this to him because the intimidation tactics that they were using on other Trump lawyers did not work on Robert. All right. And they were running away with the tail between their legs. We're going to call the bar on you, blah, blah, blah. And now he just happens to vanish again on Twitter. He happens to be targeted.
Just a few days before January 6th.
Hear this. Yeah, just a few days before this, guys. Just like PPD, just happened to be erased just a few days by the election. Do not let them get away with this. Hammer them about Robert. And that's the only way we can get their attention. It really is. All right. So with that, I'm gonna run. Follow me on Twitter, still at peoples_pundit while I remain.
and make sure to subscribe to People's Pundit Daily, because at least there you will always be in case they disappear you the way they disappeared me.
Yeah, that's right. Laura's like, don't forget, yes, the maps will be up. They are done. The code is built. It's just that we're asked because of that. It's still a quagmire. So they asked
better election day turnout than happened in the general.
Yeah, they're going to.
Republicans are behind compared to the general going into election day.
Absolutely. And those results will be up on the homepage. They're done. Everything's done. Just have to hit the publish button, which they asked me to do at noon tomorrow. Okay. It will not be behind the paywall. We're going to leave that open for everybody because it was the holidays. Things were slow anyway. And then you'll be able to watch the coverage right on that page. So the page updates live. It will be faster than the AP, and you'll be able to see my smiling little face right there to tell you what is going on when those results roll in. All right. So to everybody, super chats, viewers, shares, likes, whatever it is, thanks. We appreciate it. And we will see you tomorrow for special election coverage. All the best, folks. Thanks for watching. What are the odds?
The lights that shine down over dotted lines of white across an open highway, restless night. between. I see you in the morning light.